Here I am again with somebody that I've worked with for many, many years who now splits his time between America and South Africa. And so he looks at politics from both sides, but he's still African deep in his core. Justice Malala, welcome.
It's so good to be here, Stuart. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to our conversation.
As I say, we've known each other for many years, and I think what made me wanted to get online with you is firstly to say congratulations on your shortlisting for must be the most prestigious of the literary awards, Sunday Times Literary Awards, for your book, The Plot to Save South Africa. That was when did that come out?
It came out in the US last year. Actually, it came out simultaneously in the US, the UK, and South Africa in April 2023. So it's been a year and a bit now. And it's sort of trundled along and sold quite nicely. I mean, South Africa has been really good for me. It just continued to sell nicely. And this latest thing is just so lovely to be affirmed by the Sunday Times Literary Awards. You're right, they are so prestigious. I mean, when I worked at the Sunday Times a long time ago, and afterwards, it's the one thing that writers in South Africa look forward to. The prize is nice, the ceremonies are always nice. You should try to get to go. It's a fun event, and it's a lovely affirmation of South African literature, nonfiction. It's just great.
And you're also amongst some big names. Castor's book is there, Johnny Steinberg. So, you know, it really is well done to you. I read the book. I thought it was a couple of years ago, and maybe it seems like it was, but it obviously not that long ago. So well done on that. But we were talking a little bit about how the written word just isn't so valued anymore. I mean, the days when you were on TV, you would know. I mean, explain to me just the kind of impact that being on TV had when compared with any other media.
No, absolutely. I think people like me, particularly people who come from a print background, people who write books, people who write newspaper columns and so forth. We're still in love with this thing. Oh, the reading and it's I don't know. It's part of it is snobbish, part of it is cultural. It's an old culture, and it was my daughter reads, my son reads, and so forth. And it's no longer like that. People are audiovisual. People are. I always make a little experiment when I'm on the subway here in New York. I get on and I count. Generally, there'll be about 40 people in a train carriage. If it's full, maybe 27, 30 or so. And I'm always looking to see how many people are reading books. Now, I lived in the US 20 years ago. At that time, I'll tell you, if you got on that subway train at 8 a.m., you would have at least 15 of the 30 people reading a book or a newspaper. Now everyone is on their phone. I'm lucky if I get 2 people reading a novel or a book of some sort. And so the world has moved so fundamentally, Stuart. I think the way we communicate has changed. People like me who write books need to understand that probably you listened to my book, on Audible or something. That it's not just the word as it is written. So I think we're in the middle of maybe not a transition, but a big change in the way people consume media. I write columns for the Times, the Financial Mail in South Africa, and I can tell you now, circulations have declined very badly. It's not the good old days of print media are gone, and people watch and listen. Television is very powerful, but even for the guys who are still, subscribing to their with a little decoder over there, it's all gone. Many of us are on the, as they call it in the industry, cord cutting. We've moved from the decoder and so forth. We now strictly with the streaming services. So that changes things. That changes the way we watch the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump and so forth. And so big changes, big changes. So the impact, as you ask about television in South Africa, television was great for me. When I did the Justice Factor on ENCA, it went from, I think it was you, Stuart, and my wife, just the two of you watching it, and maybe my mother in Hammanskraal, to being on prime time. It was on Monday evenings at 8:30, at 9, at 9:30, alternatively at various points. And it had solid advertising support, solid audience support. And that was, it's a massive thing. It's a massive medium, and it gives you incredible reach. So television still has its place. It's still powerful. But I think what we're seeing with TikTok, Instagram, other platforms and forms of consuming news, consuming nonsense, consuming music, they're definitely replacing the written word. I might feel sad about it. I do feel sad about it. I like reading myself, but this is the way it's going, and it's a revolution. And for people like me who've always worked in media, if you don't embrace it as you've done, Stuart, with this show and channel and everything that you're doing with this product, then you'll be out, and you won't see what hits you.
And it's also interesting because you being on TV was good for the speaker's agent, for the speaker bureau, because you had the profile, so people would watch. They didn't always remember your name. They said that justice guy, or the guy with the big smile, or whatever it was, but they knew what you looked like. When we repeated the name, they said, yeah, that's the one. And then they were booking you, as a political analyst. And so the business grows. Yeah, we just have to keep moving with the change in media. Now you're talking about Kamala Harris and Trump. It seems, well, just it all depends, of course, on which media you follow. If you follow Fox, you get one side of the story, and if you follow the rest of the commercial TV stations, Kamala's way ahead. What was your take on it?
My take was that my take is very clear. I think Donald Trump totally underestimated Kamala Harris. He thought he would, as they say, own her. He wasn't well enough prepared. He didn't prepare on the issues that matter, the economy. I think the border issues that he's made an agenda item, he didn't bring enough facts to the table. So as a first round of debate, and if there will be a second round of debate, he was outclassed, he was outsmarted, and he came across as an irritable old man. She made him look the way he made Joe Biden look at the last debate.
That's exactly it.
Look that way. If say, you've watched a million speakers, Stuart, and you would know if you have a panel discussion, and that panel discussion is allowed to have some jabbing, some boxing to it. I would say that she baited him, and he fell for it, and kept on throwing these big punches, and he'd miss, and she'd take him on the side of the head, and he'd titter and nearly fall over. So I think even Fox News or other platforms on the right, it's clear if you follow people like Rivera, even Sean Hannity, who interviewed him immediately afterwards, they weren't enthusiastic as in, Mr. President, you've done it. For me, there was a telling moment when he came out of the studios and then went to the spin room. So the Americans set up this whole thing, and it's hundreds of journalists. and if you're of influence of some kind, so if it was you and I, Stuart, I would go in and have the debate. You'd go to the back and say, did you see my guy? Did you see my guy? He's good, he's good. So what was interesting for me was that, he sent J.D. Vance out. He sends out all these people to say, he was amazing, and no one is buying it. And so he comes out and says, I was good. I was good. I was, and he, quotes these polls that say 80% for Trump, 90% for Trump, and so forth, which are not scientific. So, it's you and me sitting at home and clicking on our computers or something like that. So for me, that said it all. It said that even he knows that he was subpar, and he wanted to make up for it. And the only way to do it was to do that. So he went on Hannity, he went into the spin room. He was at 6 o'clock the next morning, he was on Fox again, saying the same thing, I won, I won, I won. And what's interesting is that Kamala Harris hasn't come out once to say, I won. Just people saying that she's won. So,
yeah.
However he plays it, my view is that he lost. Look, and I wrote a column about this in the Financial May 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. After the debate with Biden, I wrote a column saying it's all over by the shouting. It's curtains. The man was ahead. He had obliterated Biden. Biden came across as someone who just wasn't capable.
No.
He'd lost it. He looked like an enfeebled man. His mental acuity was all over the place. And so you could say with confidence that Americans are not going to vote for this guy. They're going to vote for Donald Trump. So I said, if nothing happens, Donald Trump is walking into the White House. It's over. But with this, the polling is still neck and neck and so forth. But we now have a race, and with just weeks to go to November 5, it's a very interesting, it's wide open, and now you have a fight on your hands. It's not a foregone conclusion anymore.
Can Trump's dyed-in-the-wood followers be persuaded otherwise?
No, I think Donald Trump is almost tribal. The people who support him, and they will support him rain or shine, come what may. It doesn't matter. He is assured of that. What Donald Trump is missing, in my view, is, let's take on the issue of abortion and particularly young women in the United States who feel a sense of disquiet about why are men trying to tell me what to do with my body, and so forth and so forth. It's a very sensitive subject. It's a key subject. If you alienate people like Taylor Swift, who has 283 million followers on Instagram, and you make fun of them, you call them all kinds of names, that is the constituency that Donald Trump needs to move to his side, and he's not reaching out enough. So he is assured. He's assured of his base. His base will not move to Kamala, but there is a big base of undecideds that he should be doing more for. So when he flabbed that question about healthcare, for example, there are many people in the United States who don't have, like we have in South Africa, medical aid and so forth. People who want to go on Medicare. If you say, I'm going to get rid of Obamacare, this is what I'm going to do in place of it. And when he says, I have the concept of a plan, instead of saying, I have a plan about what I'm going to do, people say, ooh, what's going on here? So I think he's playing the wrong field. So, the man is energetic, Stuart. I'll give you, I have to say, when I'm his age and I can do what he does and appear as he does, it's amazing. So he's continuing on the East Coast of America this week, and he is addressing rallies, but he needs to be careful. Those rallies are his people. Whether he pitches up or doesn't pitch up, they will vote for him. It's the undecideds that he needs. The undecideds beat him in 2020, and that is where he needs to go.
Okay, let's talk about what's happening with our politics. Today, the Minister of Agriculture, who's also the head of the party, has said that his chief of staff will be leaving. Now, I've been watching this. Here's a guy who's had racist comments. He's bigoted. He's obviously, you can say what you like, but, his tweets and his behavior prove just that. So now John Steenhuisen has said, I've told him he's got to go. And I think it's long overdue. It's the start to me of seeing people falling on swords or being thrown onto swords. How do you read it? How does the rest of the world read it? We haven't spoken since our elections. What do you read into it all?
No, I mean, the first thing is John Steenhuisen. The fact that he hired Roman Kabanak first off without even considering what the impact of Kabanak's history and his tweeting and his behavior on his podcast and so forth would say about him. I think this was a massive moral failure on the part of John Steenhuisen. I wish we could do it. If you go on the agreement, the intent of agreement that was signed on June 14 by Fikile Mbalula and Helen Zille. It goes on, that's page 1. On page 2, there is a line that says the foundations of the government of national unity. And it says we want to build a country based on inclusivity, no bigotry, all these principles that are essentially from our constitution. If John Steenhuisen had understood those, he would have said, this guy is not my guy. He'd have said, look, I know so much about him, but more may come out. What do I not know? And he should have had that discussion with him. And so you have this week stories coming out that while you and I were voting on May 29, Roman Kabanak was in Russia, paid for by Rosatom, the Russian nuclear energy, to come and essentially produce propaganda saying, oh, look at that. Now, you might say, I'm no engineer, I'm no nuclear scientist. It may be that we need nuclear. We actually have nuclear in South Africa with Quebec. So is it bad? We've never had an issue with Quebec. It's been going for 30 plus, 40 plus years now. So all that said, you have this man, he goes to Moscow and he says, oh, no diversity here, no Chinese here. You won't find a little China here. Oh, no. It just gets worse. This is a man who invites to his podcast Nazi, not just Hitler boosters. And John Steenhuisen didn't know. So John Steenhuisen needs to take some responsibility for his own failure as a leader, as a moral leader, as an ethical leader, as a leader in the GNU, that this has been, it's terrible. And he can't just say, I asked him to leave because the press says so, the media say so. He must tell us why he wants him to leave. Because if he believes that Roman Kabanak is fine, then we know who John Steenhuisen is. But if he says Roman Kabanak is wrong and for these reasons he must go, then that's fine. I'm happy to listen. For Kabanak himself, Kabanak was one of those guys who started the Purple Cow party 4 or 5 years ago, 2019, I think it was, for the 2019 election. It's a free country. This is what's so beautiful about South Africa. If he wants to continue saying the things that he says, by all means, go ahead. But we know who you are, and don't expect to come and then be paid by the taxpayer while saying these kinds of things. You know, I with people like Roman Kabanak, I think there are several issues at play. One, he wants attention. So he thinks if he says these things that are hurtful to people like me, to people who stand against bigotry against Jewish people and so forth, when he doesn't rebut their stuff and all these things, then he, you know, that's who he is. That's fine. He says he's a free speech absolutist. Good for him. He must go on and say these things, but he mustn't expect the state, us, to
Pay his
in
bills.
yeah, to pay his bills. He must pay his own bills. So I'm glad and I'm happy that Steenhuisen hasn't done it. But Steenhuisen needs to know that right now I look at him and I say, you aided and abetted that man when he knew what he was. And there's a second issue here, Stuart. It's not just him. It's also Ronaldo Hoos, who's an MP, whose tweets, one of them, the more notorious one, where he says, we must kill all, and he uses the K word, we must kill them all. Well, you know, this is a DA MP, and if I was a member of the DA or was a leader in the DA, I would be saying, is this what Helen Suzman fought for, stood for? I mean, what did Helen Suzman alone stood up in the apartheid parliament and fought against this bigotry? And today you have you have a guy who says these things in the party of Helen Suzman. I mean, if he wants to do these things, he can go start his own party and do these things, not in the DA. So Steenhuisen's leadership needs to be shown by him standing up against these things. Otherwise, all the inroads, all the successes that the DA and its many leaders before Steenhuisen have notched up are meaningless and will be rendered meaningless because, frankly, and we have to put it clearly, Black voters will continue to be suspicious of the DA when the DA not only doesn't say anything when hurt is being done, but when they're calling for something to be done and someone like John Steenhuisen doesn't do anything. Ronaldo Hoos still is an MP, DA MP, unless there's something new today that I haven't seen.
I haven't seen that, but maybe they are going to start looking inwardly. I mean, to me, the whole reality is that the DA still looks white. And, you know, can they not do something which shows that their intent is what their promises offer? Because to me, that was and is continues to be, you know, if you're in a party which is in South Africa, it needs to look South African. And you know, it doesn't. It just doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, representativity matters, and people need to feel and see themselves in their leaders. That's one. But you know, I would even say it's fine. You know, no one is forcing the DA to elect leaders that are Black largely. If the DA did what it stands for, and the DA and the DP before it, and the Liberal Party before them, so forth, they stood for liberal values, they stood for tolerance. Imagine a man like Alan Paton, who was a leading liberal in South Africa in the 60s, the 70s, who did all these things, now being faced with someone in their party being an MP who uses the K word. And so for me, it's not just the you know, if you get rid of Musi Mamani or Mohamed Mashaba, all good and well, that's your party and there will be consequences. But at least behave in a manner that says that I am not racist, that I'm not part of that gang. I am of a deeper worth and a higher value than that. My principles, my ethics are still of the nature that I say I am. And the DA has not been doing that with these appointments, with its foot dragging on these appointments. It has not been doing that. If you think about how swiftly the DA moved to deal with Khalib Kachalia, for example, and I'm not saying bring back Khalid Kachalia by any means. You know, you dealt with him. You believe that his support for Palestine over Israel was not what the party stood for. And I think Emma Powell, I think is the spokesperson who wrote him a letter. She was very clear about what he did wrong. But they dealt with it decisively. So here's another matter in front of you. Deal with that decisively as well. Why did John Steenhuisen wait for so long on the Kabanak matter to go to China and come back? Only now, after 3 weeks, is he acting. It took far faster action on many other issues. So I think it's what you do. It's not always just what you say you're doing. Because the DA could have a black leader who is not liberal, for example, and is just there because they are black and, oh, you know, we need a black leader. I think a black leader in the DA, I think there are many black leaders in the DA who are brilliant. But I look at a brilliant guy like Makashule Ghana, who is now with Rise Mzansi. He was DA in Gauteng. I've put a lot of, he's a young guy. I think that was the future of the DA. I still wonder if there is enough soul searching in the DA about why are we losing someone whose whole life has been of a liberal outlook. And who's worked and rose up in the ranks to become one of the key leaders in Gauteng. And when Razim Zanzi comes along, he finds a home there. Why is Haman Mashaba gone? Why are so many of them gone? So I think there's a soul searching to be done there. But the DA needs to look at not just the individuals. It needs to look at its ethos and say, am I living up to those ethos of your Helen Suzmans, Alan Payton, so many others, you know, and I worry that is not being excavated enough in the DA. Can I just say, you know, Stuart, the ANC has been a spectacular failure for 30 years. Spectacular. I mean, you have a kid dying in a hospital saying, please get my mom to me. And nowhere in the world would a government survive that. The ANC has not just survived that scandal as we speak today. It survived many similar scandals. Rahima Musa Hospital, Charlotte Matake Hospital. There isn't a government hospital outside of the Western Cape that is not facing challenges similar to what you've seen at Charlotte Mateke, Rahima Musa, all these hospitals. The video by Tom London showing him saying, I lay in my own excrement because no one would help me in a hospital. And people were passing by, people were talking about their parties and so forth and so forth. So the ANC, my brother, the ANC has been spectacular in its failure, spectacular. Think about crime. If you're a woman in South Africa, just in the first 3 months of this financial year, 9,300 women were sexually assaulted.
That we know about.
That we know about, exactly. We can't, National Treasury, the Reserve Bank, will not use the numbers of our own Statistics South Africa because they were rubbish. So the institutions are collapsing. The state is collapsing. You would think that in this situation, you would have an opposition that goes boom and shows up the ANC. So part of the challenge for the DA is that the DA is at 22%. It's been at 22% since the days of Helen Zille and Mmusi Maimane. We South Africans have to ask ourselves, why is it the DA and other opposition parties have failed to make me vote for them? And I'm painting a rough picture of South Africa. And people who have been absolutely destroyed by the ANC are still voting for it. Only in this election, actually, is the ANC going to 40 and going to who? To another ANC guy, Jacob Zuma, who was part of the destruction of this country. So my view here is that the DA needs to do serious self-correcting, serious soul-searching, not just about itself, but about why it has failed to. When the DA should have got the votes that went to Jacob Zuma in this past election, and it should be by rights, if it was a proper, empathetic, awake opposition, it would have gone to 45 to 50 or totally taken the ANC out, but it hasn't. And at the going rate, it won't, because it just doesn't look at itself enough and say, what am I doing here?
You know what I think? I think that possibly living in the West for big chunks of your life now, living in America, you're starting to think first world, which is a very dangerous thing when you're talking about South Africa. It's not, if you living here as I do all the time, I think we kind of understand why stuff doesn't happen that should. I am, however, starting to see some green shoots. I want to know what green shoots you're seeing in our last 9 minutes.
Okay, I see a lot of green shoots, Stuart. I'm very optimistic about the possibilities for the government of national unity. I think that it brings moderation and it brings enthusiasm at many levels of our discussions. The first thing is, let's take Home Affairs. There's a guy at Home Affairs, Leon Schreiber.
Yeah.
The Home Affairs, the new Home Affairs Minister. He's a delight. He's an absolute delight. And he's a delight because he also there is a consumer journalist who used to be at Times Live. She's now at News 24.
Wendy Knowler.
Wendy Knowler. Now, Wendy writes an email, has been writing emails to everyone about an incident that occurred that pertains to the partner of Judge Edwin Cameron, who got stopped, got harassed mightily at OR Tambo Airport by a Lufthansa employee or employee of an employee, and so forth and so forth. No one would say anything to him. She writes an email to this guy, the new Home Affairs Minister. Overnight, he responds to her. Now, I want to tell you something. If you asked for anything from Home Affairs, and I have particular experience of this, and I have spoken, in fact, person to person to Aaron Motsoaledi, who was the Home Affairs Minister the past 5 years. I've spoken to him about it, and he couldn't solve my problem. When it should be solvable. And it was, I want to pick up my passport. And no, you can't. No,
how ridiculous.
Simple stuff like that. But this new minister does this and gets until Wendy's column in News 24, in which she says, the minister said, da-da-da, and we will solve it. And he went and looked, and there was action all around. Lufthansa answered, the border management service answered, people were begging to, no, we will solve this problem, da-da-da. And it is, if the head of the organization says, guys, this is how we do things, this is how we're going, those things will be done, and the entire body of the animal will begin to work the same way. If Minister Aaron Motsoaledi really pulls up his socks and says, we're going to clean up and make the hospitals, whether it's Rahima Musa, whether it's Charlotte Matleke, whichever, we're going to make them work and be clean. I'm telling you, they will work. It starts at the top.
But now, is the will there? Is the will there? Because with Leon Schreiber, the day after he was appointed, he was already making changes. I saw a tweet this week. Somebody who had applied for an ID book, 10 days later picked it up. Unheard of. But not in the real world. I got a new English passport from South Africa in my hand 1 week later through England. So it is doable.
It is absolutely doable. And this is the thing. The ANC and the ANC ministers may think that, oh, you know, what's going on, and think they can do things the way they've always done them. But let me tell you this. Leon Schreiber goes and does all these things. There's a program that Motsoaledi started at Home Affairs, and that was, we're going to make sure that the backlog of applications and dealing with all these things is done by Christmas. Here's leadership. Leon Schreiber didn't say, no, this was Motsoaledi's program. He got there and said, this one is a good one. I'm going to own it. So you talk about being on social media. You'll have seen on social media, there is Schreiber walking around. He sets up a thing. People come in and he's, what do you say? He's greeting them, his employees, dancing with them, saying, guys, we can do it. They're working 24 hours, all day, all night in shifts to get this thing done. Why didn't the minister do that? Schreiber is making it done. And you know what? Schreiber is on Twitter, he's on newspapers. I've written about him saying, this guy, this is the spirit. Da, da, da. If the DA does that at Home Affairs, if McPherson does it at Public Works, if Gwaruba does it at Education, if Malatsi does it at Communications, and you start having these things happening, you begin to say to the rest of the executive team, guys, do something. If Ramaphosa, if it's true that Ramaphosa has been having people, his own guys, dragging their feet on key issues and on working, then he'll start saying, guys, look at these guys. They are beating us hands down. We better do something. Maybe, and I think maybe here, we could begin to see some things. There are other things that the Ramaphosa administration I've said before, and in the past year, I've been saying this. I think electricity, I think we're getting on top of it. I think that's going to be a good thing. I think that if we fix Eskom as much as possible, there'll be maybe 1% on the growth number, because part of the reason why our GDP growth has been so terrible is that we don't have electricity, and we haven't had it for so long. So I think that's a highlight. I think the fixing of Transnet has begun, and I think that it's continuing. I think that's a highlight. So at governance level, I think some things are happening. The new leadership at Transnet may be doing some of the right things. Law and order, the rule of law, some good at the NPA. I'm still not 100% happy. I think that we could do so much more, but the beginnings. I'm very worried about crime. I think that consistently the ANC has failed on crime. And I don't think Senzo Mchunu was going to surprise me at all. I think he's continuing pretty much as he has done. If Cyril Ramaphosa was brave, he'd have plucked that young man, Mkhwanazi, from KwaZulu-Natal and made him his police minister. He actually can make things change. Leadership matters, and leadership on Ramaphosa's part would be saying, let me not take some guy that I think, let me take a policeman who's done it, who's got to the highest in the police. Let me make him minister and take him over and let him take over. I'm telling you, Stuart, there is a possibility to turn that around. You and I don't talk about crime anymore. No one talks about crime in South Africa. And yet your business, my business, everyone's business is so affected. Everyone's lives are so affected. We live basically in fear and so forth. So I think the GNU presents us with an opportunity. That opportunity is to rebuild. And I think it's possible to do it. But it will need work, and we're not over it yet.
And listen, we've still got some big surprises, and big is the operative word. I'm thinking of Gayton McKenzie. He's a big surprise. He's a big character. He's a big personality. Who knows, when somebody wants stuff to happen, if his heart's in the right place and he's got the ear of his generals, well, I'm a lot more hopeful now than I was this time last year, and it sounds like you probably are.
I am. I'll tell you, I would say Gayton McKenzie, for example, has a lot of energy, but I think that energy needs to be used very, very, needs an outlet that's positive.
Yeah.
If I were him, I would speak to Kenny Kunene, who is his partner in the party, but who is also the MEC for roads in the city of Johannesburg, the MMC for roads in the city of Johannesburg. There are ways to win as a politician, for you to win personally and for you to make the country win. Johannesburg is the economic hub, the economic powerhouse of this country. Kenny Kunene can make it beautiful by making sure that one area, I'm begging, guys, steal as much as you like, but Kenny Kunene, make sure that the tender that you issue for the fixing of the roads, the clearing of the roads, is the one tender that is not corrupt, where you actually get people who do the work. Just one. And start there. And then maybe the others you'll clean up and da-da-da-da. But this one, just get the right guy for the job and say, it shouldn't take, you know how long we've been talking about potholes in Joburg?
10 years or more.
20 years. It would take 3 months to fix those potholes. Let's do it. And then Joburg will look a little bit better, and the rains will come and it will look a little bit cleaner, and maybe we get more people and they clean up the streets. If you keep a clean house, and I mean physically clean, maybe you'll begin to say, this clean house needs a nice economy, and then you start somewhere. But we're not doing those things. But I'm positive. I think that we've reached a turn. I think it's great that the ANC went to 40% in these past elections. It's got a bloody nose. My view is that the ANC will never come back, that this is the beginnings of the end.
Yeah.
And so it's a brave new future out there. And hopefully it will be better than what we've had so far.
It's been great catching up with you as always. Thank you for your insights. We'll see you when you're next in South Africa, and I'm sure you'll be doing some work with some of our clients. I look forward to all of that.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for having me. I just want to say again, it's lovely to talk to you. It's lovely to talk about the positives that both you and I see, and we've always said these things in the talks and so forth. South Africa is a great country. It's got great people. It's got great leaders. We need to give them a chance. They need to give the people a chance. We can do great things. And I think we are at that inflection point. And if we use it, it will be amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Cheers.